Okay, this is Drowning in Pshat, chapter 1. Drowning implies desperation. So what does it mean to drown in Pshat? Since no one seems to be kicking and screaming for dear life, and won't until we enter another very dark period of anti-Semitism once again. In this context, it means that people are so involved in the world of Pshat that it is preventing them from looking at other, more profound levels of Torah, all of which have tremendous bearing on the situation today. In this case, a person can be drowning and not even know it, which can only result in disaster once again, God forbid. It always has in the past. History is always a function of two levels of reality. The big picture, right? God's overall plan for creation, and the small picture. The world, the individual. As long as one small picture of reality does not interfere with the big picture reality, then there is peace between heaven and earth. However, the moment that it does, Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, will do whatever it must to right the situation, usually at the expense of man. In other words, the big picture reality is God's master plan for creation. It's what he plans to do with all of existence, and he never strays from that purpose. It's always on target. We may deviate and force Hashem, so to speak, to have to alter the path, but the destination remains the same. It's like GPS. You know, if you're taking using GPS to go to a certain destination and already predicts the path you're going to take, or you've already plugged in the preferred path you're going to take, and all of a sudden it tells you to go right and you go left instead. It recalculates. It works out the path you're going to take to get to the final destination. So the original destination didn't change. Where you left from, you left from. The final destination also doesn't change, but the path you actually take and which turns you to take is very much determined by the turns you take along the way. So it resets itself. Likewise, Hashgacha Pratis, of Baruch Hu, may reset the master plan for creation based upon the things that we ourselves do. But the final destination, the big picture, the master plan, the purpose of existence, that never changes. However, we live in this world and we're not always focused. I mean, a tzaddik is somebody who's always tuned in to that master plan and therefore is always asking the question, what can I do to further the cause of creation? That's what righteous people do. The rest of us, basically, we live from day to day, and we go about our lives, and if we're living by Torah, we're doing the best we can to live by the mitzvahs. But we have personal concerns, we have family needs, we have jobs, we learn, whatever the case may be, and we build a small R version of capital R reality. It becomes our own personal reality. And as long as whatever we're doing does not contradict what the master plan, the big R reality demands at the moment in time, so everything is fine, because Baruch Hu can put up with us. But the moment that our version of reality starts to differ too much from the master plan of creation, to the point it starts to pull things away, so then there's going to be some kind of corrective device in history. And that's what the Torah says. If you will walk in my laws and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you the rain in its season, and the land will yield its produce, and the trees of the field will produce their fruit. However, if you will not listen to me and do all these commandments, if you will deride my laws and detest my judgments, and not do all my commandments, but void my covenant, then I will do the following to you. I will cause you insecurity, skin disease, and a fever that will destroy your outlook and cause anguish. You will sow your seeds in vain, because your enemies will eat them. Now the Gemara points out this is understood classically as reward and punishment. You do the right thing, here's the reward. You do the wrong thing, here's the punishment. And history has certainly shown how much that can be the case. But we also see how good people can prosper, and good people can suffer. We've seen how evil people can prosper and evil people can suffer. Right? And the Gemara points out that anyhow, you cannot be rewarded for a mitzvah in this world because your body would not be able to handle the pleasure. So therefore the Gemara says that reward is for the world to come. Likewise, for the most part, Gehenna, the rectification period of time, is also later on after the year 6000. So what's all the reward we have right now and all the punishment we suffer? It's more cause and effect. Because Baruch Hu says to us, if you're going to work with me and be a partner in helping to fulfill the purpose of creation, I'm going to help you out. I'll work with you. The Gemara says in Brochus that all the good that we enjoy in this world is really just called tzedakah. It's a stipend. They help us go from mitzvah to mitzvah to mitzvah in the end. So that's what the Torah is telling you. This is not the reward and punishment, because we see it's not always true. But rather, that's for later on. That is 100% true. In the world to come, judgment is judgment and din is din. There's no way around it. In this world, basically, it depends upon how much you're involved. On a Pshat level, this means learning Torah and keeping the mitzvahs to the best of one's ability, and doing whatever you can to Mekayim Torah. For many, that is all it means to keep one small picture reality aligned with God's big picture reality. Just do the mitzvahs, be a good soldier, right? However, as history has shown, though this may be enough to earn one reward in the world to come, it has not always been sufficient to protect one from the horrors of history. These are the questions that come up, tzaddik v'radlo, righteous people. Okay, somebody who seems to be a nice person is suffering. We know that people have skeletons in their closet, and there may be a reason to justify what they're going through. But when you're talking about Gedolei Ador, you're talking about the leaders of the generation, people who clearly have no skeletons, they are tzaddikim through, and yet they suffer in this world. And yet they can be killed just like the next guy can be killed. And sometimes very, very brutally. So, how does that fit into the big picture scheme of things? So, the Kabbalists and the commentaries, they focus on this, they discuss it. There's lots and lots of discussions, lots and lots of details. But the bottom line is that there's two realities. There's the one of earning reward in the world to come. And that's very straightforward. You do a mitzvah, you get reward. You do a mitzvah with intention, you get more reward. You have lots of intention, lots of reward. It's commensurate. That's the way it's supposed to be. But in terms of protection in this world, there's different needs, different moments. There's different mandates. There's different things going on. There's an agenda to Maisa Bereshis that might allow us to survive and be protected, and there's times when it doesn't. But can we do something to mitigate that? When there's Torah mitzvahs, we're doing that. What else? How can we mitigate the situation? So there's partnership. There's working together with God to help creation reach its intended destination. There is taking the initiative to right what has been wrong about history so that God can do it with us and doesn't have to do it for us. Because when he has to do it for us, then we usually pay a heavy price, to which Jewish history is a tragic testimony. We don't get the job right, as it says, program or pogrom. Either we do something to deal with the situation and then get heavenly help, and then you will get Yet Shmai, heavenly help. Or Kodesh Baruch Hu has to accomplish the same thing through us, because of us. And we usually pay the price. There is no question that when a Jew learns Torah and fulfills the mitzvah, he's a partner with God in the fulfillment of the purpose of creation. However, we see that during specific times in history, Talmidei Chachamim, right, Torah scholars, have had to get up from their learning and play roles that went beyond the base medrash, such as in the case of Mordechai, who even went down in status in the Sanhedrin in order to orchestrate the Purim miracle and the redemption. He had to leave his learning, he had to leave his post, his position, and get out there because nobody else was doing it. He took the initiative. If the Jewish people had managed to remain in a state of redemption, or even to reach one in the first place, then learning Torah would be all that we'd have to do, and all that we'd want to do. There would be no Yetzer Hara, and the only desire we would have would be to come close to God as possible, with each passing moment. Something we cannot truly appreciate on this side of history, while there still is a Yetzer Hara. However, that is not the case. Instead, Jewish history has been about exile after exile, and the demands of one period of time has not always been the same as others. The final redemption has been a work in progress for over 3 millennia now, made up of many exiles and smaller, shorter redemptions. There have been quiet periods of time, but they've been overshadowed by noisier and more dangerous ones. Of course, It has all been for the sake of eventually getting to the final redemption. Everything that happens historically, even the things that look like we're going backwards, are all for the sake of the Gula Shlema, the ultimate and final redemption. However, it has also resulted in additional opportunities for Jews to participate in the redemption process, which requires A, sensitivity to the historical needs of the moment, and B, knowledge of what can be expected of us in meeting those needs. You have to know what a Kodesh Baruch Hu, God wants from us, what we can do in any given generation, in any given situation. The question is, and this is the question, right? Where does one find such information? This is not something discussed in Cheder or Yeshiva or amongst most Jews. Where does one turn to get such knowledge, especially since knowing it, as we see from Megillah's Esther, the story of Mordechai and Esther, can save lives, many lives. Mordechai was in touch. Mordechai knew what to do. And because Mordechai did, he saved the entire generation, which could not save itself because no one had a clue what was going on and how the change was happening. Some of that knowledge is right before us all the time. However, like a lock, a key is required for us to unlock its deeper levels of meaning. For example, there are the following verses from Tehillim, very famous verses, right? You will arise and show mercy to Tzihah, since the time to favor her, the appointed time will have come. For your servants have wanted her stones and have cherished her dust. So these simple verses from Tehillim, which are said daily by countless people around the world, allude to so much. The first verse has been used in different parts of Tefillah, davening, and has been put to music and made into a song. People sing it. The second verse, unfortunately, is less famous. Yet, so few truly understand what these verses should mean to us, especially at this time of history. Over 2,000 years into the fourth and final exile, the Jewish people were destined to undergo. Going back to my Bereshis, the second verse, as the Medrash points out, all four exiles were predicted. Abraham had the same prophecy later on. Yaakov also had the prophecy of the four exiles, the Babylonian exile, the Median exile, which came the tail end of the Babylonian exile. Then came the Greek exile later on, and finally the Roman exile, Edom, which we're still in this very day. These verses speak to our specific period of history more than any other parts of Torah, and direct us during a period when we lack prophecy to make sense of the events of our time. David HaMelech, he was a prophet, and he composed these verses with special divine assistance called Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, which makes Tehillim unique, not just some prayers and words. Because Baruch Hu told him to say these things. He was inspired to say these things, that we should have them later on throughout history. Furthermore, in addressing the Jewish people, he could have chosen one of several more familiar terms, such as Yisrael, Bnei Yaakov, and Bnei Israel. These are common terms we use. Sion is not so common. So why did he choose the word Sion? Why did he choose the name Sion to talk about the Jewish people in this verse? This is significant because Sion is the term employed by the prophets to refer to the Jewish people in a state of redemption, or at least on the way to it. As the verse says in Yeshaya, and we say at the end of Daven Uval Tzion, and a Redeemer will come to Tzion, not to the Jewish people, not to Eretz Yisrael, but to Tzion. Hence, he also refers to the time to favor her, and the appointed time, phrases that refer to the time of redemption. Therefore, when David HaMelech wrote these verses, he was thinking about the Jewish people at the end of days, Achrit Yamim, whenever that would be. He prophesied that at that time, just in advance of the final redemption, the situation would be difficult for the Jewish people, what the Talmud calls Chevli Mashiach, the birth pangs of Mashiach. Therefore, he provided an extra piece of information of paramount importance that, out of context, has not meant very much to many people, even those who recite the verses daily. He provided the key to the divine mercy that the Jewish people would require just in advance of the final redemption. What does he say? He says, For your servants have watered her stones and have favored her dust. There is only one place in the entire universe that this verse can be talking about, and that's Eretz Israel. Incredibly, David HaMelech revealed that the pressing issue at the end of history will not be how much Torah we are learning or how much chesed we can perform, though these are always important as well, especially for earning reward in the world to come. It will be one's relationship to Eretz Israel. This is counterintuitive for some, since Zionism, which is obviously derived from the word Zion, has taken on additional meanings today. First of all, there is religious Zionism, but can there be any other kind? Is there anything else besides that? Of course, the term was created to distinguish it from its counterpart, secular Zionism, which is one of the greatest oxymorons of all time, since Zion, the term Zion itself, refers to the entire Jewish nation living according to the entire Torah in Eretz Israel, with the base of Mikdash, the temple, and the Shekhinah, the divine presence dwelling on it. What they all have in common, or at least should have in common, is the love of Eretz Israel, as David HaMelech indicated. Hence, he does not mention anything about having mercy on the Jewish people, but upon Zion, which is the reality of the Jewish people that emerges when they finally rectify the sin of the spies and accept and cherish the gift of Eretz Israel. On this issue, there is much division and therefore controversy within the Jewish people. Indeed, how one feels about the land of Israel today is the most controversial issue amongst all Jews, religious ones who in the past didn't even care, secular ones who in the past never even thought about it, and everyone in between. Indeed, it is probably one of the most contentious issues worldwide, thanks to a small, landless people known as the Palestinians. History and international law easily reveal that the Palestinians have no official claim to any aspect of Eretz Israel. There are books written. People have done the research. We know the history. We know what happened. Their existence and claim to land have been more a product of Arab military defeat and a conscious decision by the Arab world to take through world pressure what they couldn't steal through war. Decades ago, the idea would have been ludicrous. I mean, the world just didn't see it that way. We didn't see it that way. The PLO was a terrorist organization, as they say, that never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They're always doing the wrong thing. They were ruthless murderers who did not play by anyone else's rules but their own. And for many years, that is the way most of the civilized world saw them as well. I mean, we remember the 70s, the 80s, that's the way it was. Then something strange happened in 1987 with the beginning of the first Intifada. About 40 years, a significant number, usually it represents a period of gestation, of completion of a certain process, and there's footnoted over here, since the founding of the modern state of Israel. All of a sudden, the world changed sides, especially the Western media, which seemed only too willing to forgive the PLO for all of their past transgressions, to ignore historical fact, to use established falsehood as established truth, and to take up the cause of the Palestinian people against the Israelis. Like the giant frog in Egypt that split into countless tinier frogs, the more you hit it, the more the Israelis did to try and protect themselves and defend their right to the land, the more the world turned against them and supported the Palestinians. It's baffling. The situation became surreal, at least for the average thinking Jew, seemingly indicating something very divine about the direction of history. It says in Tehillim also, "This is from God, that which is wondrous in our eyes." This is another great insight bequeathed to us by the ancestor of Mashiach, knowing that prophecy would not last forever, but the need for it would. David HaMelech penned the statement to tell us how to know when history is the result of direct intervention by God. This is what he says. If the so-called, and this is paraphrasing the pasuk above, if the so-called natural flow of history, as we see it happening, and the papers report it, does not point to such a conclusion of what just happened historically, then what has occurred is overt hashgacha pratis, overt divine providence. Everything is hashgacha pratis. Everything is divine providence. We'll see after. The Gemara says that no one moves, raises a finger, stubs a toe, whatever the case may be. Nothing is done without divine providence. It's all run by Hashem. But there's covert divine providence, and there's overt divine providence. How do you know which is which? So David HaMelech said, Meis Hashem Haisa Zos, He needless by name. You know this from is directly overt hashgacha pratis when it doesn't add up. Things occur. Russia implodes for reasons that we can't explain. Now the Palestinians gain popularity again for reasons that can't be explained. It's overt divine providence. It means something, and we have to decipher that. Intifada 1 and 2, together with world support for the Palestinian cause, are examples of this. There's plenty of support for this on the level of Pshat and Remes, but it is on the level of Drush that this makes the most sense. However, how many will even go this far? How many will lift their heads out of the waters of Pshat and see the forest for the trees?